One person is all we need. We are live. Welcome, everyone. I am Rebbetzin Bat-Chen Grossman from ConnectedForReal.com. I am a marriage coach, and this show is all about marriage and everything that affects marriage. And today we have Candice. She's going to introduce herself, and then we're going to tell you why we're here. So go ahead, Candice.
Hi, I am Candice DeLeeuw. I'm from the United States. I live in North Carolina, around the Charlotte area. I am a mom to 4 and spend most of my time Uber driving my 3 living children all around. You guys have Ubers there, right?
We know what they are.
Okay, like a taxi, you know? I'm like a taxi for my kids. They don't pay me though.
Wow.
Let's see, I decided to homeschool this year because of COVID. We decided to just jump in and do that for a year. So I'm a homeschool mom. I'm also a teacher, like an actual teacher online for community college. Writer, blogger, author, speaker, and the president and founder of an organization called Hope and Healing Hearts. And a wife.
Cool.
I'm a wife too. So those are all the things. That's like every day, right?
Yes. And my favorite. Okay, now we can start live. Nicole is here. I love that Nicole is always the first one to send a comment and say she is here. So welcome, Nicole, and welcome everyone else who is watching. Make sure to send us, likes and hearts and comments so we know you're here. And throughout the live, if you have any questions, make sure to ask in the comments. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about child loss and how that affects your marriage. And Candice, you could tell us a little bit about your son and, a little bit of your story, because I think it's really, when I heard it, I was inspired, and I think it's really important for people to hear. And then we're going to, dive into how that affects your marriage and all of real life and all of that great stuff.
All right. Well, I think there's so much to our story of our son, but I'm going to try to condense it a little bit. So our first son was born perfectly perfect. He scored, we have this test called the APGAR test in the United States. And so after your baby's born, they run all these tests and they look at their color and all the things. And he scored a 9.9, like a 10's perfect. So he was basically perfect. And about 18 hours after he was born, he had turned gray. We did not know. And they took him to, they came rushing down. They had taken him to the nursery, and that's where they found out his coloring was not well. They didn't know what was wrong with him. So they called another hospital. And at that time, that hospital realized it was probably something with his heart. And so they told him to give him this medicine. And they came and got him and airlifted him to another hospital. It was about 2.5 hours away. So my husband followed in a car with my mom, and I had to stay back because I had a C-section and I couldn't leave the hospital yet. And so it was there in about 2 a.m. My husband got the news that our son had been born with a congenital heart defect. And his was a very serious and complicated one called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And essentially, your heart has 4 chambers, and the bottom left chamber was completely underdeveloped. And the aorta that connects to that bottom left chamber is the one that sends blood everywhere to your whole body. And that also was extremely small and underdeveloped. And so that was an issue. So his body, although his heart could pump blood to his lungs and get oxygen, it was not able to send it to the rest of his body. So we knew we had 3 options. We were given 3 options. 1, to just let him peacefully as possible pass away. 2, to undergo one of 3 complicated open heart surgeries, or wait for a heart transplant. So the problem with heart transplant is you can't put an adult heart in a baby's body. So his heart was the size of a walnut, and you have to wait for, I know, so small. So you have to wait for another child to pass away. And that's just, I just couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it. So we opted for the 3 surgeries. First surgery was a success. He was in surgery for over 6 hours. So to me, it just amazes me that like a surgeon was able to work on a tiny heart like this big. Like that's just crazy. I mean, that's mind blowing. And to me, like, so I will tell you, we did not know that anything was wrong, but God had been preparing me all along. I just didn't know it. Of course, in hindsight, I see it. But he had, we got an insurance that covered his ICU bed. Like, wow. We didn't even get it for our other kids. I just happened to like add that insurance on before he was born. The night before he was born, I said to my husband, you know, I feel like we're having a baby tomorrow because I was going to be induced. I feel like we're having a baby tomorrow, but I don't feel like we're bringing a baby home. I'm like, who says that? Right? I know. And
one of the most beautiful blessings that that the women here give each other is that, you know, you should have an easy labor, an easy birth, and you should come home with full hands and a happy heart. And it's such a beautiful blessing, you know, full hands. You should be like, you know, your hands are full, like there's too many things to bring and whatever, but like it really means, it's such a deep meaning. And a
easy
happy heart.
Labor, though, I mean,
oh, yeah, don't worry. Around here, people just popping out. No, I'm just kidding. It's, you know, it's doable. It's all in your mind, and you got to get through it. You can't go around it. So
yeah. But anyway, yes. So, and then the other crazy thing is the morning that we were going to be induced. My husband probably thought I was the craziest person ever. We get out of the car and I was like, get back in the car. And I'm crying. He's like, what is wrong with you? And of course I was nervous about, you know, this whole process, but I was overcome with just this, this emotion. And I said to my husband, we have to pray right now. And he was like, what? I'm like, we have to pray right now. And so we got back in the car and I just kept saying over and over and over again, God, whatever it is you're about to do, just prepare our hearts. Whatever it is you're about to do, just prepare our hearts. And like, I had no idea what was going to happen, but God was just preparing me for what was going to happen. And to me, like looking back at that and knowing that he cares enough to prepare me and prepare my heart for it. You know, I don't know. It's just amazing to me. So anyway, so yes, so he had open heart surgery. Surgery went really well. We were able to see him after open heart surgery, which is just a weird thing because when you go in, when a child has open heart surgery, they keep their chest open. So yeah, so it's super weird when you go in and see them after because their chest is actually open and they put like it's almost like a saran wrap over it. So you can see their heart beating through the saran wrap. It is the weirdest thing. But then I'll tell you, like, so that's like crazy to see. Like, that's really kind of creepy and it's overwhelming. There's a lot of emotion in that. But then it's because they overly, like, they swell. And so they can't, like, push it back right away. So they like to give the child time to, like, let the swelling go down before they start to close it. But then once they do close it, it's even more weird because you can no longer see their heart beating. And you're, like, watching the monitors, like, is his heart still beating? Because now I can't see it. But something we don't think about every single day. Like our heart beats all the time, every day. Like we don't even think about these things. And here he was with his heart just completely open for everybody. It's mind blowing.
So beautiful. Just imagining such a concept that you can see the heart is not something that I've ever thought of before.
And like you don't think about. I think most of the time we don't think about anything being wrong with our child, but then also to have it be something that's like such a main organ, like you just don't think. I didn't even know that heart defects was a thing, but it actually occurs in one in every 100 births. There's some sort of heart defect. They're not always like super severe, but
is it something you could have seen in an ultrasound?
This one they should have seen.
And they didn't. You did all the tests and everything, and like they just did not see it.
They did not see it.
That's
so
from
normally when you go around 20 weeks and find out like the gender or whatever, they count the chambers of the heart. So they should count all 4. And I don't remember them ever doing that. But I honestly think it's a blessing, because if I would have known, like, there is still like all this uncertainty. Like, they can't really give you much more information. Yeah, they give you a ton of information. And then, of course, you start Googling stuff and you find out more information. But I think for me, like, that was my easiest pregnancy, because I was naive. I didn't know anything. Right. And the only difference that would have occurred is that he would have been born in a hospital that could have handled it. Right. Whereas he was born at a small hospital. But the amazing thing is, because he was life flighted to Duke Hospital, the man that life flighted him and I became really close. He's like a dad to me, and he would come and visit me every week. And then 3 days before our son died, his son died in a tragic accident. And so we formed this bond. Our families formed this bond. His wife, and I didn't know his wife then, but of course then I meet her after. His wife and his daughter, like, we just had this bond because we went through grief together. Like, we had our first Mother's Day, our first Father's Day, the first Christmas, like all those firsts. And although the grief is different, and their ages are completely different and the stories are completely different, we still have this relationship. And had he been born there, we would have never met him, because there would be no need to life flight him to the hospital. Right. So to me, like, all of it occurred the way it occurred, with purpose and for a reason. So, yes. So he, let's see. So about 18 hours after he was born, he just went into cardiac arrest. And because his chest was already open, the surgeon reached in and massaged his heart for about 20 minutes and brought him back. And then that just started a series of other things that occurred. Kidney failure, lungs were deteriorating, and just a lot of things. And my husband and I were very adamant that, especially as time went on, that we didn't want our son to suffer, and that we wanted to prolong his life, but we did not want to prolong his death. But, we don't know where that fine line is, and we needed their help. And so on March 17th in 2006, that's when the surgeons and the doctors had said, this is the time. And so my husband and I chose to remove him from all of life support. And signing DNR papers and making that decision is so hard, because you have all these doubts. Like, am I doing what's best? Should I just trust that God's going to heal him, and that, oh gosh, it's going to make me like, because I still, like, sometimes I still get in moments where I question, like, did we make the right decision? Or if we would have just given him more time, right, would he still be with us? Like, it's such a hard thing. But when I get caught in those moments, I remember the night before. So we had signed DNR papers. We decided that we were going to take him off life support the next evening. And the night before, my husband and I just said, we just need to pray. And so I prayed for 2 concrete things. I said, I want to walk in tomorrow morning and know, like, that we're making the right decision. I want us to know, to be able to look at him and to know. And I want his death to be peaceful, because they had, like, kind of, they had to tell you everything. And so it was scary to know, like, that he could gasp for air and all these, like, scary things that you don't really want to have to go through. And so when we walked in the next morning, so do you guys have, so we have pop in, like, these 2-liter bottles, or soda. Do you guys have that? Okay. So his body, so he's 7 weeks old. He was born weighing 7 pounds. His body had 5 liters, so 2 liters of extra fluid on his body. So he was just so swollen, and he could no longer open his eyes. He could no longer lift his arms. He was just so full of fluid because his kidneys were failing, and he couldn't remove that extra fluid. And so seeing him like that, I was like, okay, this is good. We're doing the right thing. He's suffering. We're doing the right thing. And then when we removed him from life support, they had my husband sit, and then I sat on my husband's lap, and then they put him in like kind of both of our arms, and they had us close our eyes when they took all the tubes off, because he had, like a ventilator down his throat and like tubes up his nose and just all this. So they removed all that. And I just remember looking at his face. And this was the first time I had seen his face since the first day he was born without anything on it. I just remember thinking like how incredibly beautiful he was. And then when he finally let go, he just took one deep breath, and it was like a sigh of relief, and then he was gone. And I was so thankful for both of those answers to prayer, because it was very concrete. We're doing the right thing. And it was so incredibly peaceful. So I don't have like horrible memories of that. Like for us, it was such a peaceful moment, like just the two of us and with him. And so,
wow.
So yes. What else do you want me to tell you?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. In the retreat that I do, by the way, I'm going to talk about the retreat at the end, but it's coming up in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. In the retreat, the structure is, the calm method. So connect to yourself, ask for answers, listen, and, master. And what you did was exactly that. Like, you really connected to yourself the night before and said, like, what do I want? What is important to me? Because you could pray for anything, and God is limitless. Like, he'll give you whatever you want, but like, you really need to get in touch with that real deep intuition. What is it that I want? What's important to me? And then you went to the next level and you asked for it, and you made it so clear, and you were so, it was just so easy for you because you knew what you wanted. It was easy to know what to ask for. And then you were so attentive to listening to God's answer because you're going through the process, which is so amazing. Like, obviously I'm just doing it on, a quick like overview, and we go into each one for a full hour, but that ability to listen and to say like, wow, I'm actually seeing my prayers being answered is just something that is so aligned to everything that I am teaching. And I think that it's really amazing to see that being illustrated here. So I think that's, just amazing. You're giving me chills.
And I will say too, before all that happened, I had prayed like in a hallway all by myself. He had been taken into an emergency surgery, and I was by myself, and I had prayed God, like, well, first I was just like, Jesus, Jesus. That's all I could say. It was just, I just couldn't, I couldn't get anything else out. And I just remember crying and sobbing and literally having my face on the ground in a hospital hallway, which is so disgusting now I think about it. But I was just in that moment, and I just said, God, please heal him. But I want your will, not my own. Right. And I remember and it's weird to say it. I actually didn't tell anybody this for a really long time because it was such like a weird experience. I didn't hear, like, it's not an audible no, but I knew the answer was no. And I knew the answer was no, but you're going to be okay. And it's hard to explain, but they talk about this peace beyond all understanding. And that is exactly what I had. And I knew that each day was just an extra day to get to know him and to learn all the little details of him. So I knew, and it wasn't, people, I didn't tell people because I didn't want people to think I lost hope in his healing, because I knew that God could heal him if he really wanted to. But I also knew that the answer was no. And although I don't understand why the answer is no, and why he would be formed in such a way. Right. But I knew that
it was a way of releasing control, just accepting what is, which is really beautiful.
Which is difficult for me because I like to control everything.
Oh, you're the only one.
Oh, you know what? When I was listening to one of your past ones, you were talking about people who like to like control everything and like everything a certain way. And I was like, that's me. Yes.
Yes, because it's me also. I have such a hard time. I'm like, I remember doing one time a really cute, like meditative exercise where it's like they tell you close your eyes and really get like breathing, whatever, and like, and then hold the thing you're trying to let go of, and then like physically open your hands and let go of it and see it going out of your hands. And I'm doing this, right? I'm doing it, and I let go, and I open my eyes, and my hands are still. And I was like, okay, that didn't work. Let's do it again. I had to do it a couple of times because my physicality was saying, yeah, very nice try, but not happening.
Right.
And there's some things that you just can't let go of. So the ability to let go. And I want to address something that you said before we get into how it affected your marriage and, all of that stuff. There's one point that I wanted to make that was really beautiful. When you said we didn't know if we were making the right decision, and even now we're not even sure because, we never know anything. But like one of the things that I had to, I went to one of the wisest rabbis here when we were going through something, and I said, I talk to God. I say, I want to do your will. Just show me your will. Tell me what you want and I'll do it because I have no idea what you want from me. And if I don't know what you want, then how do I know what I want? Because my will is your will. And I'm going in circles, right? And I'm like trying to figure this out and I'm not getting any answers. And I went to him and I said, I don't know anymore. Like, what does God want from me? And he said, it's really simple. In order to know what God wants, you have to look at reality because God doesn't do anything that he doesn't want. Like there is no mistakes. So if it happened, then that's what it has to happen. And you just have to let go and be like, that's exactly how it had to happen. And it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with God's will. Because if it wasn't God's will, it would not have happened. Mm-hmm. And that was so releasing and relieving because I no longer had to own all of these questions and doubts. It was just like, that's it. It was done. It must have been what God wanted. Get on with it, And so, you could do it for the past of what had happened. And you can also look at the present, It's like, I want it to be this way, or I think God wants it to be this way. But if it's not happening, it's not happening. You know what I mean? Like, it must be that God wants this right now because this is what is. And God never does anything that isn't exactly what he wants. Mm-hmm. So
it's that control thing again for us. It's the control thing.
And it also reminds us that it's all in our head. My mother is on live and she says you're a great person. So I just wanted to tell you that.
Thank you. She's talking about you.
No, you wrote your name.
Oh, okay.
That needs to be written what the rabbi said. So important. Thank you for sharing. Yes. It's so helpful because what I was going to say is that it's all in our head. A lot of our suffering, all of our suffering, like, when you get out of your own head, then you stop suffering. We're like sitting here thinking and contemplating and wondering and doubting. And did I marry the right guy? Did I not marry the right guy? Was he what if I would have gone out with that guy? And, this is one of those things that people are like 10 years married and still questioning if they did the right thing. Like, get over it. You're married to him. That's what you're supposed to be, that is who you're supposed to be married to. Get on with the show. And they're not living their life because they're in their head. Mm-hmm. So, that's from my world of the marriage coach, but like, same thing with anything else about life. If it happened, it was meant to happen. Get on with it, accept it and move on. And then it just gives you permission to live your life, which, by the way, is something that I admire about you because you're just so alive. You're so vital, like there's something so amazing about the way that you live your life and, are with your other kids that you don't expect. Like, I don't know if that's the wrong, like, it's not very nice to say, but you think of someone who goes through a trauma and you think, okay, that's it. It broke them forever. Like they're now a different person and they're unable to be happy all the time or whatever, I think maybe that connecting to like, Holocaust Day that was last week and things like that. We grew up with grandparents who went through the Holocaust and like, stories about their parents not ever smiling or not ever having, the ability to just play because they've gone through so much horror. So you think like that's just how it is. Like if you have a hard life, then it's hard to live, and it doesn't have to be that way. It's a choice.
That's right. It is a choice. It's 100% a choice.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to like get up and say, no, I don't want to be happy today, But my husband said this great thing to my daughter the other day. He said, are you going to let there's 24 hours in a day. Are you going to let a 10-minute conversation that was bad affect the other, 23 hours and 50 minutes of your day? Because if you do, you're going to ruin your whole day. And so I think, I definitely have moments where I'm still like really caught up in the grief. And, it's been 15 years. And I think there are still some days where I just get like, and a lot of times it's like sideswipe, like I just didn't even see it coming. But I think it's still okay to grieve. And I think it's okay to feel that loss and to be in those feelings, but to not stay stuck there. And I think when we stay stuck, that's when, and if we choose grief, to be stuck in our grief, that affects everybody around us and all the relationships around you. Because people just want to fix things and they can't fix that for you, especially our husbands. Our husbands are fixers. And so when they see us like that, they just want to fix it for us. And then that makes them feel inadequate because they are unable to make it better. And so I think it's definitely a choice. It's a choice. And it's okay to have bad days.
Right, exactly. I want to go back. Last week we talked about, other difficult things where Batya was telling about losing her husband. I promise you guys, I'm going to try and get a live that's like all about clowning or something, just to like change.
It's okay that it's hard. And I think it's good that you're showing people who have lived through it, but are still living.
Right, exactly.
Because that gives people hope.
So what she said last week, which was really important to, really reiterate, is that you can't go around it. That song with the kids always saying, like, you can't go under it, you can't go over it, you have to go through it.
Yes.
So you have to go through it. There's no other way. You're going to have to feel the feelings. And if not, they're going to just keep knocking at your door and it's going to get worse and worse. So just sit yourself down and allow yourself to be in that place, but with a time limit, but with like a boundary of where am I going to let this, going on a bear hunt. Very good, Nicole. I could tell you have kids too.
That's right. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I recognized it when you said it, but now the bear hunt, that's it.
Yes. Thank you. I'm not as good as my kids with knowing the words of all the songs. But yeah, you have to go through it and you have to get past it. And it's important to. It's not only that you have to, and it's something like you hold your nose and you're like, okay, we're gonna get through it. Like, no, you have to really be there and live it and feel it. And in Jewish law, we have 7 days of mourning, and they're mandatory. You don't do anything else. You're not allowed to cook for yourself and just go into real life. You like sit and mourn, and everybody has to take care of you, because if you don't do it now, it's going to come back to bite you. Mm-hmm. And then we have a 30-day period where it's like you go into life, but there's certain things you don't do. Like you don't go to parties. You don't go see other people having, life.
Now, when is this? Anytime?
So anytime somebody who is from the close relationships, so parents, spouse, children, anybody who passes away, if you are one of those 7 relationships, you one would sit Shiva, which is 7 days. And after those 7 days, they get up and there's a whole ceremony to being fed and being, sort of like picked up out of your mourning. And then there's 30 days that there's certain things, like there's laws. You can go back to life, but you have to ease up. You can't jump into things. You're not allowed to go to parties. You're not allowed to just like go back to pretend that nothing happened. Like you ease into it. And then there's a year. And only after a year, and like a year is only for kids and parents, I think, not for a spouse, but only after the year is done, then you're like, okay, I'm done. I could like clean it off, get over it, and get on with my life. But like it's mandatory because it's so important. It's like so thought out that you're not allowed to pretend nothing happened. You're not allowed to just like, shake it off and be like, oh, I'm stronger than everybody else. Honey, no, not gonna happen. And it's because human nature, is so strong. And in Judaism, we really honor that. And we make sure that we don't go against it. So
it's really smart because we do. Naturally, we just want to be like, I'm fine. I don't need anybody, especially like my personality is I can do it. I can do it all. I don't need your help. Like I don't need anybody. I'm very much that way. Probably because I'm a perfectionist and I'm the only one that can do it right.
Oh, it's so funny that you say things about yourself. I'm like, we are so similar. Painfully similar. It's so hard. You could get over being perfectionist. You think you're over, and then it comes back, and you're like, no, okay, I got to start over again. It's so funny. Okay, so let's talk about how it affects your life, because that's what I'm all about. Is how does real life affect your marriage? How do you grieve differently? How do you deal with the fact that you grieve differently? You touched on a little bit that like, he wants to fix you, but like sometimes it's the opposite. You want to fix him, and so like, how did you find it in your marriage or, with other people?
So I think, so I actually only know one other couple that's still married after child loss. And that's the one couple that we have a relationship with who lost their son 3 days before we did. But everybody else, they are either going through a divorce or they are separated or, and I think it's because there's this assumption that when you lose a child, you have each other and you can lean on each other and you can, it makes you stronger. But I don't think that's true because, I guess now I look back and I do think our marriage is stronger because we went through it together. But I think it's because, so I did a lot of research and read a lot of books after losing our son. There was no, it was 2006. So there's no like communities online or anything that you could talk to other people. So I just went to books and I saw the statistic. It was like 99% of marriages end in a divorce. And I said, I don't want this to be us. So knowing that statistic forced me to be like very real with ourselves in our expectations for each other. So for my husband, he didn't want to talk about him. He didn't want to, that just wasn't his thing to like talk about his feelings. And so he built a fence and he built a garage. Like those were his things that he did after we lost him, that he just needed to go out and like build. And for me, I needed to talk about him. And so he allowed me that space to be able to talk about him, but I knew that he didn't want to. So like, I had to be okay with knowing this is not how he's like, it's not that he doesn't love him. And it's not that, he's not grieving. It's just that he is not going to do it the same way I am. And so for us to know that about each other and to not have expectations that the other one has to do what we're doing is important. Now, I would definitely suggest for if you are a talker and you want to talk through it, to go seek therapy, to find somebody professional to be able to talk through these feelings with. I did not do that, but I feel like therapy then was more taboo than it is now. And looking back, that's definitely something I should have done. I should have sought out someone professional to walk through that journey with me. Right. Especially now there's communities online. There's all these communities. You can find other women that understand you in a way that someone else doesn't. And you can walk through that journey with them because either they're going through it or they've been through it. Right. There's tons of communities out there. So I would say like, definitely do that. But the biggest thing with your marriage is just knowing that they are not going to grieve the same, and to allow your husband to grieve the way that they need to grieve. I just think that's the most important. I remember, this doesn't have to do with grief, but I remember my husband and I had an issue. And I called my sister, who's a lot older than me. I hope she's watching. And
so I'm the older one.
She's a lot older than me.
I have a sister who, I only have one sister, and she's 7 years younger than me. So I'm the older one.
I think, let's see, there's 7 years. I think it's 7 years between us. And I always say, you're so much older than me. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I know I'm on the older side. So I know it's just because she's wiser.
That's right. Yes, exactly. So I had called her, and I had my husband and I had this issue. And it was the summer after we lost Alex. So we lost Alex in March, and it was that summer. And my sister said to me, well, do you want this to end in a divorce? And I said, no, I don't want a divorce over this. And she said, then you have to let it go and forgive him. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He did this and I shouldn't forgive him. And she said, if you don't forgive him, then it will end in a divorce. And it's so true, because divorce doesn't happen because one big incident. Divorces happen because of all these tiny little things that you just keep pulling along and carrying along, and you don't forgive them for it. And then it ends up, you get a divorce. And so
baggage. What? We're walking around with baggage,
yes.
If it's serving us, like it is not serving you, let it go.
Yeah. So she's like, you will end in divorce if you don't forgive him. And I was like, do I have to forgive him right now? And she said, well, you have to forgive him tonight. And I said, okay, I'm going to go to Barnes and Noble, and I'm going to get a coffee, and I'm going to read a book, and I'm going to be good because I'm going to know that I'm going to forgive him. But I'm going to let him stew in it just a little bit longer and be a little worried that I'm not going to forgive him. But I mean, every time there's some sort of incident, I always think about that. Is this worth a divorce over? And it never is. And so therefore, like, we can work through everything.
So, the guy who wrote the 5 love languages?
Yes.
Gary, Dr. Gary something. I used to know this by heart. I don't know why it's running away from me.
It's because you're pregnant.
Yeah. So he now is all into the 5 languages of forgiveness. And I heard him speak on something online, and it was just really interesting, like how some people just saying sorry is enough, and then for some people, no, you have to actually show that you mean it, and for some people, like whatever it is, like the 5 languages, and he goes into that. And one of the things that he said that made it so much better, like it just like felt like is that just because you forgive doesn't mean it was okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't mean that, I forgive you, so now it's okay for, Gary Chapman, thank you. I'm really grateful for you, Amy.
Googled it.
No, come on. It was at the tip of my tongue. And it's actually really interesting because I gave a class last year about the 5 love languages and our relationship with God. And I was basically parallelizing, that was a ridiculous word, making parallels between, the love languages that he brings in marriage, and really how that affects our relationship with God. It's really cool. It's a great.
Good.
So anyway, that was, what was I saying? Yeah. So the whole thing about being, you forgiving is you letting go of it being your problem. It does not mean that he no longer has to deal with it or do whatever he wants. Somebody's knocking at my door 3 times and they know I'm live. That's okay.
It's probably just a kid. They'll be fine.
Of course it's a kid, and they're going to keep doing it until I tell my husband to come get it. Oh boy. I hope he comes. I can mute myself and you can talk a little bit. So number one, what you were bringing up about grieving differently is so important because we are so different in every way. You know, we're built differently, think differently, we feel differently, like we're just so different. And then when it comes to grieving, we're like, no, this doesn't make sense. You have to be exactly like me. Like, no, he doesn't. And I love how you said he built a fence in a garage, and I totally thought you meant it like in a, non-literal sense.
No, we literally built a fence.
He built a fence around him, like armor, so he doesn't have to feel.
Maybe that too.
And a garage to put all of his emotions down so he doesn't have to look at them. And I was like, that was genius. And he says, no, he actually went and built it. I was like, oh.
No.
It's
that's good though.
Sweet. Yeah, it was very profound. You were talking about like, do you want to get divorced over this? Right. I had a really good example where we were waiting for the train in New York, and the train came and it was the wrong number because we were in like a big station and there was a lot of different trains. And so I held all the kids back, and me and my husband were like, don't get on. It's the wrong train. We're waiting for the next one. And so the train opens its doors. People go in, people go out, but all of our kids are waiting nicely because they're listening very carefully. It was very cute. And so then the train goes away and the next train comes a couple of minutes later. And then we get onto the train and I say, do you guys realize what we did? And they're like looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like, the train came, it opened its doors, and we actually didn't get on it. And we waited for it to close its doors and leave. And that's exactly what happens in life. Somebody comes and starts a fight with you or says something mean, and you could totally get on that train and take it to where it's going to go. But then you realize it's not going where I want to go, and I'm just going to wait for it to pass and get on the next train. I could choose which train I want to get on, which is just genius. So it reminded me of that when you were mentioning it.
So good. You have all these epiphanies today. You're so good.
No, it's been a day. What were you going to say?
I wanted to say too, like, I think the biggest thing too is, after you lose a child, people want you to move on quickly. They want you to, and they like say horrible things, like they don't mean to say horrible things, but they just end up not being so great. Like,
the worst question, how are you feeling? Like, honestly, the last thing I want is to think about how I'm feeling. Can we get on with the program? Don't ask me.
Yes. So I think just in general, grief, especially after child loss, is just knowing that it's going to be different for everybody, husbands and wives. And I mean, you could have like another couple could be dealing with it completely different than you are. And so although talking to people and like hearing that, like, I know after I lost Alex, when we got home, like I would wake up in the middle of the night hearing a baby crying. Like, it's just like, that's crazy, but it's actually pretty common. There's lots of moms who've said the same thing. So although for me, it felt like I was going a little crazy, that is like other moms experience it too. So I think it's good to like kind of share stories and talk about it with people, talk about it with other couples, but just know that like, just because my husband and my experience is this way doesn't mean that's how you and your husband are going to be, because your husband might not build a fence in a garage. He might be the chatterbox, and you might be the one who doesn't want to talk about it. So I think it's important to just, for marriages, you just have to know that like, you're going to get through this as long as you recognize and are willing and making the choice to get through it together. Right. And that's the biggest thing.
It's an intentional thing. You have to be intentional about it.
Because I think people like want to just like leave that behind them. And I see grass is greener over here and I'm going to go over here, but you never truly leave that. That comes with you wherever you go. Like, it doesn't go away. Your grief is not going to go away. and you can't just ignore it. So, yeah.
Yeah. What were you saying about people saying things that they don't mean to be mean?
Oh, yeah, just people will say things that can feel hurtful, such as, well, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, or, he just wasn't meant to be here, or when are you going to have more? Just a lot of like questions, or you're really young, you can still have more. Like that was a big one because we were only 24, so we were really young. And they're like, well, you can have more, you're young, but that never replaces the child you lost.
No, it never does. Was this your oldest, your first one?
Yes, he was our first. And I'm thankful for that, because I don't know how families do it when they have other children and then they're trying to live in a hospital full time. Like, I don't know how you choose. How do you choose between your children, because.
Right. And also then you get into the kids grieve differently.
Right. Yes.
Which is a huge thing too. Like, you just, you hold yourself back from your own process because of the way that it will affect them. And so that's really that, in that situation, it's really important to get everybody help.
Right. And I think too, even with our own children, although they didn't know their brother, they know of their brother. And so just yesterday, my son, we were like in the store, and my youngest said, I really miss Alex, and it's funny because he doesn't know Alex, right? He never had that relationship with him, but he still knows that like we're missing a part of our family. There's a part of us that is missing. And so I think it's important to, okay. So I will say this. I remember growing up, I had a friend, and I like went into their house and they had this picture of this baby, and they had like all their kids on the wall. And one was this baby. I was like, who is this? Is this your oldest brother? I thought it was her oldest one. And she said, shh, we don't talk about him. And I was like, what do you mean we don't talk about him? Like, I didn't know. And she said, he died when he was a baby, and it makes my mom cry, so we don't talk about him. And I was like, oh, okay. And like, I remember that. And I never wanted my kids to feel that way. I wanted my kids to be able to talk about him if they wanted to talk about him. And so we made a choice very in the beginning that we celebrate his birthday. So we always do something for his birthday. So we've gone to there's this place called Great Wolf Lodge. It's like this huge indoor water park hotel. So we'll go do that. This year we went snow tubing in the mountains. So we just choose to celebrate his birthday each year. Instead of taking it as a day to be sad, we celebrate the fact that he was here and that no matter what, he's a part of our family.
That's so beautiful. You don't celebrate the day he died. You celebrate, not celebrate, but most people will make a memorial for the day he died.
Right. And we did for a long time. We would always release balloons, and we would write a note on the balloon and release balloons. And so then the kids would write a card, they would draw a picture, and we'd attach it to the balloons, and we'd send the balloons off. But then after our son was born, the littlest one, that was the last year we did it. And I think I just had shifted in my grief, and I no longer needed to do that thing anymore. And so I think that's important too, that just because you start a tradition, just because you do this thing every single year, it's okay to say, I don't need that anymore. And I don't have to do this anymore. It's okay that I don't do this thing anymore. So yeah, so now we don't do anything on the day that he died. I of course remember it and talk about it, but it's more important to celebrate his birthday, because that's when he was here with us, and that made him a part of us.
Wow. I love that. I think that's really, it's really beautiful. Tell me about when you wrote your book, and how long it took you to really face it, be able to do that.
You know this answer.
I do, but not everybody does.
Listen. Sometimes God asks you to do things and you just don't want to do them. And that was me. And so probably about 3 or 4 years after he had passed away, I felt like God was like putting on my heart that I needed to write this book, and I was not going to do it. And I guest blogged on a friend of mine's blog and did some things there. And I thought, okay, good, I'm doing it. I wrote, like, I don't have to write this book. But man, like, I just kept feeling God telling me, no, you need to write it. That wasn't enough. That's not what you're supposed to do. I was specific. I told you, like, oof. But so then finally I was like, listen, I don't need to write this book. And I stopped hearing God telling me this. And I was like, he's got me, like, we're good. I don't even do it. I ignored him long enough that he's no longer asking me. He moved on to somebody else, and I was okay with that. Like, I was so good with the fact that he moved on to somebody else and that I was no longer called to do it. And then my husband and I chose a word for the year, and our word was promise. And I had written down all these promises that I was asking God for, and felt like God had given us. Okay. And then my sister, the old one, the wise one, she had called me and said, whatever happened to that book you were going to write? And I was like, I'm not doing it. And like, God's not asking me to do it anymore, so I'm good. And then the next day, my best friend calls me and was like, whatever happened to that book you were going to write? And I was like, I'm not doing it. Why are you two talking to each other? Like, what's happening? Why are you guys asking me about this? I'm not doing it. And then that weekend, so like literally 2 days later, the sermon at church said, he was talking about how sometimes God calls you into something, and if you don't answer, he'll call back. Don't worry, it's call waiting. He'll call back. And so long story short, all these signs just kept coming in to write the book. And so I said, fine, I'll do it. And I sat down and I wrote it in 3 months. I busted it out in 3 months. I know, crazy. And it was really hard because having to like go back and pull out, I wanted to be super vulnerable, but to go back and pull out emotions that you stuffed down for years is so hard. Like, there were days I didn't, like, my husband got home from work and I said, I'm going back to bed, because I was that exhausted, emotionally drained from the experience of having to be vulnerable. And to a point, like, there was a time I didn't want to share some things. And do you know Brene Brown? She talks about vulnerability.
I was just going to say that.
She's so good. I had listened to her thing. She had this thing on Netflix, and I just like happened to find her. And then, of course, I read all of her books. But I watched it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be. So my husband gets into bed. I tell him about the thing I just watched. And he said, you know what that means, right? And I was like, no. And he said, it means you're not being vulnerable enough, and you need to be more vulnerable, and you need to share those things that you don't want to share. And I was like, oh, but there's a reason why I don't want to share them. Like, that's hard, you know?
It is.
And it's one thing for you, like, as, you know, or just like someone like I don't know, like super, super well, to pick it up and to read. Like, that's one thing. But for like people that I hid my feelings from, like, and people that I pretended that I was fine, and like people that knew me during this time and saw a different side of me, to read then something that's completely different than what they saw me as, I was very fearful of that.
Yeah, that's usually the biggest thing. Like, you know why I wasn't shining for like the longest time? Like, I was scared to speak in public and like really lean into my voice. Oh yeah, it was one of my biggest fears. Was because what would my mother's friends say? Like, who cares? Who cares? But they saw me grow up, and they were always like, oh, that's, you know? And so, like, does it really matter what they think? No, I got over it. Yeah, but like, it was hard. It was really hard. Because that's exactly what you're saying, is like, you have this like thing that you built up, and now you have to actually show the real behind the scenes, and you're like, And once you did it, I'm sure it, you know, it just came back like with so much love from the people who heard it, because it's exactly what they need to hear.
Yeah. And I think, you know, although it's a book about child loss, I think, you know, a lot of people that have read it have not experienced child loss. So although it's a book about child loss, I think we all experience grief. We all experience loss, and it might not be loss in even a person, you know, but loss in a dream that you had. You had this idea that you were going to be this person, and something happened, or the loss of your health, or the loss of, a job, or a loss of.
Just now with COVID, I heard someone say that everybody experienced loss in a different way.
Yes.
And not all of them were big and like you could, write a whole book about, it was funny. Like when you were talking about loss, I was thinking about how I was trying to open a group program a while back and it just didn't happen. And I felt like the biggest loss. And I had to grieve it and process it and be like, I didn't open the program and I'm a total failure. And, okay, get over yourself. It's going to be okay, And, like you feel it in intensities that you feel guilty almost. Why is this, like when my kids scream and my husband says, it sounds like somebody died. Like, what's up with you? But like, that's how it feels. And so that's how you experience it.
Right.
So it's really important to validate all that loss. I really like what you're saying about how it doesn't have to be something big in order.
Yeah, it doesn't. We all experience that grief and have to kind of go through that process. And then not only go through the process, but then figure out, well, what's next for me? Like, what does this then mean? And so I wrote this book. It's so hard to put it in the right spot. Called Hope Amidst the Stories I Told Myself, How to Find Hope in Love and Loss. And so the cool thing about this book is, first of all, our surgeon, Alex's surgeon, wrote the foreword to the book, which I think is amazing that he took the time to do that for us. I think it just shows our relationship and just the impact that he had on the people there. And but the cool thing about this book is that I don't take any profit from the book. Nothing. Unfortunately, to my husband's dismay, I do not take anything from this book. But instead, for every book I sell, I priced it so that I could then give one away. So we opened an organization called Hope in Healing Hearts. And we funnel all the money through that so that it's black and white and that nothing comes to our own accounts. It all goes to the business account. And then I give these away like to people who have lost a child just that I meet randomly. Okay. So I do it that way. But the biggest thing I do is I work with organizations such as Duke Hospital, an organization called Mend. I work with a doula who has them on hand. So if she has a mom who has a stillbirth, she's able to give one to her. And the goal is that I want someone who's experiencing their darkest moment to be able to leave that moment with a little bit of hope. And so like with Duke Hospital, which is where our son was born, we gave them an entire year's worth of books. So every time a family loses a child, they get a copy of Hope to leave the hospital with. So that's what we do. And it's been an amazing journey. It has not been an easy journey to be open and to be vulnerable. And
like I said last week, you don't choose these situations that come to you. You don't sit around and like bargain with God. Like, okay, so listen, this is something I want. This is something I don't want. Like it happens to you. And then you're like, okay, what do I do with this now? Mm-hmm. And that's where the real magic happens, where you can actually say, what do I do with this now? Like not get stuck in the past, but really move forward. And the fact that you're able to lean into the story and be vulnerable and help other people, it just creates a purpose, and it gives you hope that there's actually a reason why this whole thing happened, because if you didn't lean into that, it would just feel like it happened, like, well, there's always a point, but you wouldn't feel it as much. Right. So I think that's really powerful. The ability to turn it into purpose.
And I think sometimes, I said, what is the point? But I also think, for 10 years, I didn't, or really 13 years, I didn't do anything with it other than teach my children about him and and I would talk to people around me. So I think you don't have to do something like really big when you lose your child. My kids always raise money for the American Heart Association every year. Like that's just the thing that they do to honor and remember their brother. So I think you don't have to do something really big for it to be impactful and to have purpose. But yes, I just knew this was something I was supposed to do. And even though I ran from it for like 10 years, it was time to finally do it. And honestly, when I wrote it, I kind of thought I'd just put it on my own bookshelf. But
yeah, nice try.
I know, right? That was so much easier. Oh, geez. And then to release it during COVID while I'm trying to homeschool for the first time, there was just a lot of elements that I like literally only because of God was I able to do this. And so the surgeon wrote the foreword. And while I was waiting for the foreword, I God told me, like, you need to write, like, you need to do this other thing. And so I wrote a study to go with it. And this is specifically for child loss. And so you read Hope, and while you're doing it, you work through the chapters. And each chapter has 4 parts: reaction, reflection, response. And my favorite part, so it has like questions to help you work through your feelings. But then my favorite part is every chapter has a place for the mom to write their own story. And so there's writing prompts, but then it gives them the opportunity to have a space to share their story. And I did it in color and have like pictures and stuff because I wanted it to be something that they could cherish forever and to hold on to. Because I know for me, when I finally wrote out my story and finally released a lot of those feelings, I held on to everything for so long, even the really bad things. Not because I wanted to hold on to the bad things, but because I didn't want to forget anything. Right. And so I think when we can finally write down everything, even the bad things, even the really hard things, it releases us from having to carry those hard things anymore. And we can just carry the good things and the good memories, because if we want to reflect back on those hard things, we're not going to forget it because we wrote it down. It's right there. And so I wanted to be able to give that to a mom as well.
I love that.
But that one we can't give away because I only make $1.10 on that one. So I can't give this one away. But I do have it out there, and then we just use the profit from this to continue to help support this one. So it still all goes to Hope and Healing Hearts, but unfortunately, I'm not able to give that one away.
Okay, so I'm going to put your website up and tell us what people can expect when they go to your website.
So I blog every Monday about different topics. And so every Monday there's a new post on there. And let's see, there's a bunch of different tabs at the top. So you can see different places that I have appearances or different, a little bit more about us and about our story. And then there's also a link to Hope and Healing Hearts on there. So you can see more about the organization we started. And right now our mission with Hope and Healing Hearts is just to bring hope and healing through those who are dealing with life's heartbreaks. And so right now the biggest thing is grief, but we're going to be adding childhood anxiety to that piece as well, because we are experiencing that in our family. And I have a children's book coming out called Ben's Bossy Belly, all about a little boy with anxiety. And that's a real story. It's real life, what we experience here with our son with anxiety, and just kind of the different things that trigger it and what those triggers look like. And then also how the mom and him come together to kind of overcome it. Now, you don't really overcome childhood anxiety. You just learn to deal with it. And so, so actually the mantra that I came up with, he actually tells himself that when he's getting worked up, which is in the story. And I don't know, maybe it'll turn into a series. I have lots of ideas on different things, like how to be friends with Ben, because, right, like it's different being friends with a kid who has anxiety. And what does that look like? And so, yeah. So anyway, so I don't know. We'll see. I don't know where it's going. I don't know what else we're doing. If I feel called to do it, I just do it.
If you have any questions, you have God on speed dial.
That's right. Am I supposed to do this or am I not? I don't know. I guess maybe if the kids go back to school, I'll have time to write another one.
Right, for sure. But you know what? There's a time for everything, and it just feels like, it seems like when you're connected and things just come through you at the right time, things will come and you'll know exactly what to do next. So I love that. We all get all these ideas and most of them are not really going anywhere, but it's just really fun to have them and to develop in your mind all sorts of like directions and things and whatever. And then like, okay, one day it comes back to you, or one day something happens, or it shows up in a different form. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, my illustrator for the book is a good friend of mine and also a teacher. And we sat down in January and we like put out a timeline when we were going to have this children's book out. It was supposed to come out in May, right? Which is like next month. And I was like, so, we don't meet the deadline. It's okay. Like we put that deadline out there for ourselves, but if it doesn't happen, it'll happen when it's supposed to happen. So,
right, exactly.
We're just whatever, but we're going to be looking for people to be on the launch team. So if you know anybody that would like to be on the launch team of a children's book, let me know.
Cool. It sounds amazing. So that's super exciting. I also want to remind everyone before we go, because I don't want to keep you too long, that on April 26th, we're having the retreat, and it's a virtual retreat that's 7 days long, and it's absolutely epic. I know that, some of you guys have been there. Make sure to come back because it's going to be even more amazing, because I took all of the feedback from last time and made it even better. But it's the marriage breakthrough retreat, and it's basically all about marriage and how it affects your business. So how those two parts really affect each other. And you know what's funny? I'm going to tell you something that I just found out this week. One of the people in my group were just saying, it's really good sometimes to look at what your competition is doing, just so that you could like be aware of what other people are doing in your field. So I'm looking for people in my field that address marriage and how it affects business, right? Like that was what I was looking for. Nothing. Wow. I did not find a single person who is a marriage therapist, counselor, coach, anything that addresses marriage in regards to your business. Because my whole point is that when you are, when your marriage is not 100% there, and it's feeling like the business is stressing out the marriage, or the marriage is stressing out the business, and like both are not helping, and so you're not growing your business, and you're frustrated with money, and it affects your marriage, and your marriage is not happy that you're growing, and and then you lean into your business more because it's an escape, and then you're escaping, but you're not actually making money. It's like a whole cycle.
Like my husband, when he didn't want me to give this away for free.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you can't argue with God. So there's that.
So, but there is ways to make a win-win situation and to make sure that it doesn't cut into the marriage and that the marriage doesn't pay a price. And one of the things, somebody was just telling me, yeah, my sister got divorced when she finally hit the 7 figures. And I was like, that's so sad, because it's the story of everybody. It's this constant thing that you hear over and over again. People who are growing. And when they hit a certain amount, they're like, okay, I've overgrown my marriage. I guess I'm done with you. And it's like, no, you can have it both. You can change that dynamic to be, I have this great example that I use in the Jewish, I don't know, the way that we see it. So you're two souls that are really one. So when you get married, you're one. So you're two bodies, but like you are connected. So when one raises their level, the other one automatically raises too, just like water, like it evens out. And so when you're working really hard, walking uphill, growing your business and changing, and developing in yourself and transitioning and transforming into what you're supposed to do, right? Because that's all we do is like women in business. We're not in it for the money. We're like in it for the purpose. We're so connected to what we're here to do, and we're moving up the hill, but we're carrying dead weight because he's not supporting it. And so you're like moving uphill, but it's holding you back. It's like keeping you small. Am I still there? You still see me? So you're like walking uphill, but it's holding you back. It's weight. It's dead weight. It's like frustrating. And he's like kicking and screaming, I'm not interested in growing that much. And whatever it is. And you're like, I need to do this because it's my purpose. Right. And like, we have this belief that like, either I do it and he pays the price, or I hold myself back and I don't do it, which is another price to pay, which is ridiculous. We don't have to pay either price. My whole retreat is to get to the point where your husband's actually pushing you up the hill, supporting you in your purpose. And that way you have to work less. You start walking up faster. You have a lot more energy and you're supported. And, there's just, you're anyway going to have to get there together. Like there is no reason why anybody has to suffer. And I love that in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it was like the first time he said, find win-win situations, because there always is a win-win. You never need to lose ever. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And as I said, we're going to talk about the calm method, which we happen to have mentioned in the beginning of the show. So it's not something you want to miss. Go and sign up right now, ConnectedForReal.com/retreat. And I can't wait to see you there. You're going to be there for sure.
I'm signed up.
I know you're signed up and Nicole is signed up, and I don't know who else is watching, but I'm sure you'll all sign up because it's really worth it. It's amazing. I'm like so excited about it because it was like me finally shedding all of the layers that I was protecting myself of, like, shining and showing up. So I feel like you were talking about the book. It feels the same way. Like you're called. And it's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And then when you do it, you're like, duh, that was exactly what I needed to do.
Yep.
Okay. So what's the one practical thing people can walk out of this conversation feeling, really inspired and pumped up about?
I just think the one thing is, like, especially with with marriage and grief, is just finding ways to connect, finding ways to understand each other, so that you're not like leave the expectations at the door. Connect and communicate, and then say, okay, he's going to grieve his way, I'm going to grieve my way. And to really allow that space to be able to happen, and to not judge each other for the way that we need to grieve. So I think that communication, that connection is what establishes that. Because if you don't ever communicate, like, to your spouse, this is what I need to do to grieve, this is my way of grieving. I mean, I would have never expected that my husband was building a fence because he needed to grieve. Like, but that's exactly what he was doing. And then once he explained that to me, it was like, oh, okay. You do whatever you need to do. You build whatever you need to build. And so, because I was just like, why are we doing this? Why are you now adding this garage? Why are you adding this fence? And so it was that communication to realize, okay, this is what he needs to be able to process those feelings and those emotions. So I think in any marriage, communication is such key. So communication and dropping expectations is such key for success in your marriage.
Yeah. And I want to add the timing thing. Some people, you can grieve for a certain amount of time and be like, okay, I did it. I went through it. I'm done. And the other person needs to do it nice and slow and for a long period of time. And eventually they'll just be ready to get up and they'll do it on their own time. And you're like trying to rush it. Leave it. Don't rush it.
Can't rush it. No.
It's going to take as long as it needs to take. And that's okay.
Yep.
That's beautiful. Oh, thank you so much for coming. I just want to
having me. I always love talking to you.
I know, it's so fun. You guys don't even know. It's like heart connection. It really is. It's such an amazing thing that, like, all of your branding has hearts on it because there's something about you that's just like magnetic.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, so come back next week. We are going to be talking to a doula whose specialty is processing birth stories, and they don't have to be traumatic in order to be processed. It's really important to to process to go through the process of processing. And I was going to say that about, what you were saying also, but that processing process is so important. And when I was talking before about like not opening up the group program, like it was literally that, like I am processing the process of processing, like, this is crazy. So we're going to be talking about that next week, same time, same place. And if you guys want to get Candice to, tell you more about the book and things like that, I'm going to put up her website again. And thank you so much for showing up and for coming live or for watching the replay. If you do leave a message after the replay, just do #replay and we'll be able to see it. And that's it. Thank you.